The German army that broke through France in 1940 wasn't unstoppable. It was chemically enhanced on methamphetamine, issued by their government in chocolate wrappers. And they weren't the only ones. Every major power in World War II ran on drugs. The Nazis, the Allies, Japan, all of them. And the decisions those drugged-up commanders made changed the borders of the modern world. This is the story history class skipped, Pervitin. The pill that started everything. Berlin, 1930s. A chemist working at Temmler Werk synthesizes a new compound. He calls it Pervitin. It is methamphetamine. Here's the part that should concern you. Pervitin goes to market with no prescription required. You walk into any German pharmacy and buy it the way you'd buy aspirin today. It becomes an absolute bestseller almost immediately. The marketing was worse. Temmler Werke advertises Pervitin as a treatment for seasickness, for postpartum depression, for fatigue, for, and I'm quoting directly here, frigidity in women. There are chocolates laced with methamphetamine, marketed specifically at German housewives. The product is called, without a single trace of self-awareness, housewife chocolate. Germany is eating crystal meth out of a candy box. Now you might be wondering how a regime built on racial purity and physical superiority justified handing out meth to its entire population. And the answer is one of the most spectacular pieces of ideological gymnastics in modern history. Blitzkrieg on speed, the invasion that shocked the world. Drugs were condemned. Publicly, drug use was called a symptom of weakness, a remnant of the decadent Weimar Republic, morally repulsive and ideologically incompatible with the idea of the German Superman. But Pervitin was different, and the reason is elegant in its perversity. Every other drug helped people escape reality. Pervitin eliminated the need for escape. It made you awake, alert, euphoric, and completely incapable of registering exhaustion. It wasn't a pleasure, it was pure performance, which meant it fit Nazi ideology perfectly. A military physician named Dr. Otto Ranke tested it on soldiers and documented the results carefully. His finding: with Pervitin, a soldier could function for 36 to 50 hours without feeling tired. Ranke was naturally a daily user himself, and the army was about to find out exactly what 36 hours without sleep could do to a war. September 1939, the invasion of Poland. Pervitin's first real military field test. Germany overruns the country in a month. 100,000 Polish soldiers were killed. But France is the main event. Between April and July 1940, the Wehrmacht distributed over 35 million Pervitin tablets to its troops. The Temmler Werke factory runs at 833,000 tablets per day. Tank crews receive theirs pressed into chocolate called Panzer chocolate. Pilots get Flyers chocolate. Then came the Ardennes. Terrain the Allies called impassable. A forest so dense and steep that no serious military commander would route an armored advance through it. The Germans go straight through it, cover 240 miles in 11 days, and the French front simply ceases to exist. Historian Peter Steinkamp put it plainly: Blitzkrieg was guided by methamphetamine. If not to say that Blitzkrieg was founded on methamphetamine. Historian Shelby Stanton added, the entire army was chemically stimulated. The world had no answer for what just happened, and the soldiers, they just kept going, because they chemically couldn't stop. Here's what nobody told those soldiers before they started. What goes up at 833,000 tablets per day eventually comes down. And when an entire army crashes, it looks exactly as bad as you'd imagine. The crash. Addiction swallows the Wehrmacht. This detail is often excluded from standard historical accounts. What do you think happens when you give an entire army methamphetamine for months and then try to take it away? Letters home from the front paint a picture that is difficult to read. Soldiers writing to their families, begging, not for food, not for ammunition, for Pervitin. Military rations weren't enough. They needed more. They always needed more. From generals down to ordinary infantrymen, addiction spread through the Wehrmacht the way any epidemic spreads through a closed population. Fast and with no respect for rank. The side effects were exactly what you'd expect from prolonged methamphetamine use at scale. Heart arrhythmias, heart attacks, extreme dehydration, constant nausea, hallucinations, severe depression the moment the drug wore off, and complete inability to sleep without additional sedatives. Which created a new problem. To sleep at all, soldiers started taking barbiturates, powerful sedatives, to come down from the Pervitin. Then more Pervitin to wake up again. A cycle of chemical stimulation and chemical sedation, repeated daily in an active war zone with weapons in their hands. And here's the detail that tells you how bad it had gotten. One lieutenant colonel in a panzer division filed a report that included this detail. He had personally taken 2 tablets of Pervitin twice daily for 4 consecutive weeks. His result? Heart pain and blood pressure readings so abnormal they would have been alarming in a civilian hospital, let alone a battlefield. By 1941, Germany's own Reich Healthführer, Leo Conti, sounded the alarm in terms that were almost prescient. He warned, "Germany is becoming addicted to drugs. Anyone who seeks to eliminate fatigue with Pervitin can be quite sure that it will lead to a creeping depletion of physical and psychological performance reserves, and finally to a complete breakdown." Conti tried to get Pervitin classified under the opium law. The army ignored him. They needed the fuel. The men who had torn through France were becoming something else entirely. And at the very top of the command structure, something even stranger was happening. Because the man publicly preached physical purity, the man who banned drugs as a sign of moral weakness, that man had a doctor injecting him with opioids and cocaine on a weekly schedule, and nobody around him said a word. Hitler, the man who banned drugs while injecting them. Adolf Hitler presented himself to the world as an ascetic, a man of iron self-discipline. No alcohol, no tobacco, no weakness of any kind. This was a lie of almost comical proportions. His personal physician was a man named Theodor Morell, widely regarded by contemporaries as something between a quack and a charlatan. Morell administered Hitler a daily pharmaceutical cocktail that would be difficult to believe if it weren't meticulously documented in medical records and private diaries. The documented regimen included the following substances, and I want you to keep a running tally of how many substances this man was on simultaneously. From July 1943 onward, Hitler's primary substance was Eucadol. Eucadol is an opioid painkiller based on oxycodone, the same compound at the center of today's opioid epidemic. By 1944, Morell was injecting Hitler with up to 20 milligrams per dose. Then came July 1944, the Stauffenberg assassination attempt, a bomb in a briefcase. Hitler survives with a burst eardrum and temporary hearing damage. Morell's response: add high-dose cocaine to the regimen. For 75 consecutive days following the assassination attempt, Hitler received a 10% cocaine solution. By the summer and autumn of 1944, Hitler was running on a speedball of opioid and cocaine simultaneously. 120 to 150 tablets per week, 8 to 10 injections per week, vitamins, hormones, and hard drugs administered around the clock. And during this period, the decisions coming out of his headquarters become increasingly detached from military reality. Historians point to the Battle of the Bulge. December 1944. Hitler insists on an offensive. His own generals consider suicidal, overrides their objections, and the result is catastrophic German losses that accelerate the end of the war. His paranoia, already severe before the drugs, becomes total. His perception of reality becomes increasingly unstable. The man who stood at rallies declaring, "We want only the strong," was making decisions about the fate of millions in a pharmaceutical fog of opioids and cocaine. History has a way of being much stranger than anyone allows in the official version. Now here's the part where it gets uncomfortable for everyone. Because Germany being on drugs is one thing, but the Allies, the heroes of the story, also on drugs, a lot of drugs. And they weren't even slightly embarrassed about it. The Allies. Nobody's hands were clean. When the British examined a downed German aircraft in the early years of the war, they found Pervitin on board. Their immediate reaction was not horror. It was an inspiration. The British approved 72 million doses of the amphetamine benzedrine for all branches of their military. This wasn't an experiment. It was a standard issue. The Americans didn't lag behind. General Dwight D. Eisenhower personally approved 500,000 benzedrine tablets for the 1942 landings in North Africa alone. Over the course of the entire war, it's estimated that American soldiers consumed between 250 and 500 million benzedrine tablets. Approximately 15% of U.S. troops were considered regular users. Approximately 500 million tablets were distributed. Japan's production scale exceeded both Germany and the Allies. Japan had its own version, called Philippon. Japan's methamphetamine was produced on a scale that is genuinely difficult to comprehend. Between 1939 and 1945, Japan produced approximately 1 billion doses. 1 billion. When the war ended, all of that production infrastructure and all of those addicted users remained. Japan's post-war amphetamine crisis left over 500,000 addicts in a country already devastated by 2 atomic bombs and unconditional surrender. Finland, fighting alongside Germany on the Eastern Front, received access to Pervitin in 1941. 850,000 tablets were distributed primarily to special commando units operating in deep snow conditions. Which brings us to one specific Finnish soldier, and what happened to him is one of the most genuinely insane documented events of the entire war. What you're about to hear is completely real. It is documented. It sounds like something someone invented for a movie pitch that got rejected for being too unrealistic. It was not rejected. One man, 30 pills, 400 kilometers. What happened next sounded impossible. One man, one desperate decision, and a journey no one should have survived. Before this chapter ends, you'll know how he made it through 400 kilometers against all odds. March 1944. Finnish Lapland. A Finnish soldier named Amo Koivunen is on patrol with his ski unit deep in Soviet-controlled territory. The patrol is ambushed. Soviet forces close in from multiple directions. Koivunen and his unit try to escape on skis. He falls behind. He's exhausted. And in this situation, exhaustion means death or capture. In this theater of the war, capture means execution. He reaches into his pocket for his unit's supply of Pervitin. Here's the problem. His winter gloves are too thick to get a single tablet out of the bottle. He is surrounded by Soviet forces. He is about to be caught. So Amo Koivunen does the only thing he can think of. He pours the entire bottle into his mouth and swallows. That is 30 tablets, a supply intended for an entire unit. A dose that, by any pharmacological measure, should have killed him within the hour. What follows is documented in military records. Phase 1. Koivunen skis so fast that his own unit can't keep up with him. Then he loses consciousness, but his body keeps going. When he comes back to awareness, he is completely alone in the wilderness. Soviet territory. No food, no ammunition, no more pills. Just snow and forest in every direction. Phase 2. Running on the last chemical reserves of a 30-tablet methamphetamine overdose, he keeps moving. He skis for days. He evades Soviet patrol after Soviet patrol. At one point, he hits a landmine, gets thrown through the air, sustains injuries that would hospitalize a normal person, and keeps skiing. He catches a Siberian jay, a small bird, with his bare hands and eats it raw to avoid starvation. The situation transitioned into sustained survival under extreme conditions. Phase 3. Koivunen covers approximately 400 kilometers, 250 miles, through enemy-controlled wilderness, alone, injured, and on a lethal meth overdose. When he reaches finish lines, he weighs 43 kilograms. His heart is running at 200 beats per minute, which is medically critical and should not be compatible with continued consciousness. He is alive. Amo Koivunen went down in history as the first documented case of a combat methamphetamine overdose. He recovered. He lived until 1989. 45 years after skiing 400 kilometers on drugs through Lapland in the middle of a world war. The Finns have a word for this kind of stubborn, irrational refusal to die. They call it sisu. If you think 30 tablets was extreme, the German military was working on something worse. Something they were testing in concentration camps before the war ended. And if the war had lasted another year, we might be telling a very different story about how it ended. DIX. The pill that could have changed everything. By 1944, Germany was losing. The Blitzkrieg was over. The Eastern Front was collapsing. Allied forces were advancing from the west. And somewhere in a laboratory, Nazi military researchers were working on their answer. They called it DIX. DIX was a compound pill. 5 milligrams of Eucadol, the opioid Hitler was injecting. 5 milligrams of cocaine. 3 milligrams of Pervitin, the methamphetamine that had already powered a continent's worth of warfare. All 3. On one tablet. At this stage, testing moved into concentration camps. It was tested on inmates at Sachsenhausen concentration camp. The test involved forcing prisoners to march in circles wearing heavy military packs day after day to measure how long the DIX compound could sustain movement under load. The results showed inmates could maintain forced, marching for extended periods beyond what was physiologically possible without the compound. The plan was to deploy DIX to U-boat crews who were expected to function as near-kamikaze units against the Allied naval invasion. The dose they were considering, 50 to 100 milligrams of cocaine combined with the rest of the compound. Germany ran out of war before DYX could be deployed. This places the development timeline in historical context. Not the weapons, not the territory, not the personnel. The timeline of the Second World War ended before a drug that was being tested in concentration camps could reach active military deployment. Historical outcomes often depended on narrowly avoided developments. The drug that powered the Blitzkrieg is the same molecule destroying communities today. They called it Pervitin. We call it crystal meth. The winners wrote the history. The pharmaceutical records tell a different story. Many of these details are absent from standard educational narratives.